So we've talked a lot over the last couple weeks about the careers of individual Imperial-class Star Destroyers, and today we're going to continue, and we're going to discuss 4 Star Destroyers that were all present in Death Squadron during the events of The Empire Strikes Back. Today we're going to talk about the Avenger, the Stalker, the Tyrant, and the Ultimatum. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So before we begin, let's talk a little bit about specifics. All 4 of these vessels are relatively standard Imperial II class Star Destroyers, the second generation of the Imperial class Star Destroyer. Now, let's just jump right in with the Avenger, which gets the most screen time. So the Avenger was under the command of Captain Needa during the events of The Empire Strikes Back, and it may have been one of the first Star Destroyers we see on screen in that movie. It was tasked with deploying probe droids as part of Operation Swarm in the hunt for the Rebel base, which ultimately ended up being on Hoth. So it very well could have been that Star Destroyer during the opening shot of the movie. And the Avenger was part of Death Squadron and thus likely involved in the Battle of Hoth in some way, either guarding the Executor or carrying out the blockade of the planet Hoth itself. However, where the Avenger really gets its screen time is during the pursuit of the Millennium Falcon. The Avenger is the Star Destroyer that initially pursues the Millennium Falcon into the asteroid field, and is one of the 3 Star Destroyers that nearly collide, with the other 2 being the Stalker and the Tyrant. With their failure to capture the Millennium Falcon, the Avenger is recalled back to the Executor, where Captain Needa is summoned to meet with Darth Vader, where he is killed. However, unbeknownst to the Imperial fleet at the time, the Millennium Falcon has actually mounted itself to the back of the command bridge on the Avenger. And when Vader orders the fleet to scatter as they begin making their way to Bespin, the Millennium Falcon actually separates from the Avenger as it is dumping its garbage and flies off into space, not knowing that they're being pursued by the Slave One, which was hiding in the Avenger's trash chute. And from that point, we don't know where the Avenger ends up. Like most of Death Squadron, it likely ends up at the Battle of Endor, where it likely was destroyed. Let's move on to the next Star Destroyer, the Stalker. Now, like the Avenger, the Stalker was involved in Project Swarm and could have theoretically been that first Star Destroyer we see on screen. Now, we don't necessarily know the role that the Stalker played during the Battle of Hoth. It was, once again, either guarding the Executor or carrying out the blockade, but we do know that it was very thoroughly involved in the pursuit of the Millennium Falcon. It was one of 2 Star Destroyers, along with the Tyrant, which was tasked with cutting off the Millennium Falcon and preventing them from escaping into the asteroid field. However, as many of us know, the Millennium Falcon was able to use its agility to sort of slip out of the way of all 3 Star Destroyers as it was being pursued by the Avenger, and all 3 Star Destroyers nearly had a collision. From that point, we don't really know where the Stalker ends up. It likely is recalled back to the fleet and is part of the main body of the fleet for the duration of the events of Empire Strikes Back, and like most of Death Squadron, likely ended up at the Battle of Endor. Next is the Tyrant, which has a slightly longer story. The Tyrant, we know where it was during the Battle of Hoth itself. The Tyrant was under the command of Captain Lennox when it was ordered by Darth Vader to carry out a blockade of the planet Hoth. It is actually one of the Star Destroyers we see on screen carrying out this blockade, and it is the first Imperial-class Star Destroyer to encounter the Rebel fleet fleeing that planet. It is the Star Destroyer we see on screen attempting to prevent the Rebel transports from escaping, and the one that gets ion cannoned and disabled as the Rebel transports slip by. The Tyrant was quickly repaired following that battle and pursued the Millennium Falcon into the asteroid field, not nearly as close as the Avenger, and was ultimately tasked with heading around, joining the Stalker in an attempt to cut off the Millennium Falcon and prevent them from sneaking into the asteroid field itself. Now, like I mentioned with the Stalker, they were able to sort of escape these 3 Star Destroyers, and all 3 Star Destroyers, the Tyrant, the Stalker, and the Avenger, nearly had a collision. Following these events, the Tyrant is recalled back to the fleet, where it is present with the fleet at the Battle of Endor. It is at the Battle of Endor that we know that the Tyrant is destroyed and Captain Lennox is killed, thus wrapping up the story of the Tyrant. Last one is the Ultimatum. Now, the Ultimatum is actually kind of interesting because it's under the command of a fairly notable Imperial leader for much of its career. We know that well before the events of the Battle of Yavin, it was placed under the command of Admiral Sloane, at that time a captain. We actually know that the Ultimatum was her flagship for much of her career, and she was only away from it very briefly during the events of The Empire Strikes Back. The Ultimatum, however, does not survive The Empire Strikes Back. It is that unlucky Imperial II class Star Destroyer that we see take an asteroid to the command bridge during the entrance into the asteroid field. All in all three of these ships are very similar on paper. They don't have any real major modifications. They're all pretty standard Imperial II class Star Destroyers. And if you'd like to learn more about the Imperial II class Star Destroyer as a whole, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments which of these four are your favorite. Which one do you think had the most interesting story? Was it the Avenger, the Tyrant, the Stalker, or the Ultimatum? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, leave it down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.